Here are the ranking updates after trades, injuries, suspensions, and yes, you can set these in stone. Here are our top 50 running backs. So at the end of the season, you can come back to this video and go, oh my gosh, you're way too low on Javonte Williams. You're an idiot, and I'm never going to listen to you again. But starting off tier 1, we're going to go with Christian McCaffrey. The pros, he scores 100 more points than the second running back in fantasy last year, and the Niners project out to be the highest scoring offense in the NFL this season. The cons, he's 28 years old. He's coming off 400 touches. He has a strained calf, so he's very scary, but he's scary either way. It's terrifying passing on him. It's terrifying drafting him. I'm still taking him at pick 1, though. Now, going over to our next guy was a little bit of a hot take earlier in the year to have Breece Hall at 2, but now it seems like most people are on board Breece over Bijan. I want to remind everybody, Breece was significantly better than Bijan last year, and both their situations dramatically improved this season, where they both have much better quarterback play, where in the case of Breece Hall, he's another year removed from the torn ACL. In the case of Bijan Robinson, he actually no longer has to deal with Arthur Smith. They're both extremely young backs. So I'm just going to go with the guy that was better last year because their situations are both respectively getting improved this season. And I'm going to go Breece over Bijan. Now, our second tier will be Jahmyr Gibbs off the board at pick 4. If you are looking at Gibbs, these rankings are going to be for a full PPR format. And Jahmyr Gibbs very reasonably could lead the NFL in receptions at the running back position this season. The question will be, what does his red zone role look like in comparison to David Montgomery's? It does look like he is good to go week 1, though, even though he had that hamstring injury earlier in the year. Our next guy will be Jonathan Taylor, Taylor Barkley. They're going to be compared next to each other all year. These are two running backs that are both playing alongside quarterbacks that are going to have a ton of rushing yards, that aren't going to check the ball down very often, the quarterbacks that are going to steal some rushing touchdowns. But I'm going to give Jonathan Taylor the benefit of the doubt because we saw Jonathan Taylor be elite just 2 years ago. And at the same time, if you are looking at JT, he is the younger running back between the two. Now, going down to our next tier, we're going to start it off with Kyren Williams. Now, with Kyren, the volume was there last season. You have to be concerned with these smaller running backs with their injuries. Kyren Williams has a laundry list of injury history just through the first 2 years of his NFL career. Them bringing in Blake Corum for sure is a little bit scary here, given the fact that he doesn't profile to be a 3-down player. But hell, Kyren was that 3-down player last season, so it's hard to move him much further down given his age and what we had last year. HN will be our next guy. HN was the most efficient running back in the NFL last season. If HN can remain averaging 8 yards per carry through the rest of his NFL career, he will go down as the best running back in NFL history. It's probably not going to happen, right? He's probably going to take a massive step backwards with his efficiency. However, if he's able to see a much larger workload, the efficiency may fall, the volume may rise, and he may be even better from a fantasy football perspective. Now, the issue with this is at 188 pounds, we've never seen a running back with this size profile really turn into a 3-down option. Plus, you have Mostert in the red zone. Plus, they bring in Jalen Wright, so it is a little concerning. Now, Pacheco's our next guy that I wish I would have drafted more of. So y'all know I've been drafting on Underdog all year. Back then, in early summer, Pacheco used to go in the 4th round. Sometimes he'd fall to the beginning of the 5th. Now, in your redraft league, you possibly have to take this guy in round 2. If you're looking at an Underdog draft, he goes in round 3. But regardless, much more expensive now than he was previously. The reason being is you look at this Chiefs backfield, you have no idea who the hell is even going to be the RB2 here. Pacheco's going to have the 3rd-down role. We've already heard that from Andy Reid. This looks to be one of the best offenses in the entire NFL, projecting out to be the 3rd highest scoring offense in the league this season. So Pacheco's just a super safe pick. And then Travis Etienne will be our next running back. Etienne was a mid-running back 1 last year. His situation doesn't really change at all. They do indicate that Tank Bigsby may get some usage in short yardage areas, which could be a little bit concerning if you think that Tank Bigsby all of a sudden is going to be a running back that has a role at the goal line. But in reality, it's probably just Travis Etienne. Now, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry. These are going to be my 2 hot take running backs this year. I think that Jacobs dramatically exceeds expectations. Right now, you can get the man in round 5 of Underdog drafts, one of my most drafted running backs there. Derrick Henry goes in round 3. In your regular redraft leagues, Derrick Henry is going to go in round 2. Josh Jacobs is going to go in round 3 or 4. Love Jacobs at that price. If we're comparing these two backs, both were disappointing from a fantasy football perspective last season. Jacobs is the much younger running back. Jacobs is going to catch the ball in Green Bay. Both of them are going to much better offensive situations this next season compared to where they were a year ago. But we combine the age, the receiving upside, and the contract that Josh Jacobs got this offseason. I am going to give him a slight edge over Derrick Henry. He's going to turn 31 in January. And at the same time, the Baltimore Ravens just paid Derrick Henry significantly less than Josh Jacobs gets paid to go to Green Bay. Now, our next two players will be James Cook, Rachaad White, both running backs, same draft class, similar draft capital. So, I mean, they are always going to get compared next to each other. I'm going to go James Cook over Rachaad White, even though I think James Cook will have fewer opportunities. I just expect him to be more efficient with his opportunities, where the Bills are projecting out to be the 5th highest scoring offense in the league this season. Rachaad White had all the volume in the world last year. I stand by that. I think Rachaad White is a phenomenal pick in round 6 of your underdog drafts. He's a great pick in round 4 of your redraft leagues, because even though he was extremely inefficient last season, they really only bring in Bucky Irving. And at the same time, this is a situation where White pretty much just dominated the targets in this backfield, and that role should be safe to project him out going into this next season. Now, Kenneth Walker is a running back that I should have taken in the Flock League. I'm an idiot. I didn't even know if he was still available. I took Terry McLaurin instead of him. But besides that, Kenneth Walker is very exciting based off what we've heard with this coaching staff in Seattle. I previously was worried that Zach Charbonnet was going to have the third down role here, but this offensive coordinator came out and said, oh no, Kenneth Walker, we love what he can do running routes out of the backfield, catching the ball out of the backfield, which is a massive green flag if you are wanting to draft Walker and see if he has upside to be utilized on all 3 downs. And that is going to give him the edge over Joe Mixon for me. Where with Mixon, he's an older back. He's in a much better offense, but the efficiency isn't necessarily there. And so I don't know if we can expect the big play upside. Now, dropping down to our next running back, it is surprising to see where just regular drafters on like ESPN and Yahoo are taking Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is going typically at the end of the 3rd, the beginning of the 4th in your regular redraft league. I've been taking him in round 7 of underdog drafts all offseason. I mean, he went at the 3-4 turn in the Flock League as well. If you're playing in a full PPR format, it's completely fine to take him. He does have the check down princess just flooding him with targets, so you are going to get those cheap points if you are trying to track receptions. But if you are playing in like a half PPR league, non-PPR league like Underdog is, there I think maybe you want to chase a little more touchdown upside, just because Taysom honestly may have a role in the red zone, which could cap the ceiling of Kamara in those formats. But of course, real quick, if you want to get into an extra fantasy football draft this year, I definitely think the best place to do so is Underdog Fantasy, because there's no time commitment at all during the year. It's how I draft hundreds of teams every season. It's how I won $150,000 on Underdog 2 years ago. And it's not too late to get into a draft with us. We're drafting every single night on the season until the season starts. And if you use code FLOCK with the link in the description and comment section, you will get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. You will get a Christian McCaffrey special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard for week 1. You will also get a Travis Kelce special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard for week 1 as well. The CMC one is exclusive to Flock users, so just make sure you use code FLOCK when you sign up to Underdog Fantasy. But moving this down to our next running back, I will have David Montgomery. With Montgomery, I think his role at the beginning of the season is going to be less compared to some of the running backs that are going after him. But I'm going to be giving David Montgomery the benefit of the doubt in the season-long rankings, because if anything were to occur to Zamir Gibbs, David Montgomery could take a step upwards to be a top 5 running back in fantasy. And I know that's crazy, but the Lions arguably have the best offensive line in the league. They're currently projected to score the 2nd most points in the NFL, according to sportsbooks. Montgomery's not going to catch the ball when Zamir Gibbs is healthy, but we saw back at his time in Chicago that if he needs to, they can use him on 3rd downs. So if you were to get a Zamir Gibbs injury, I think it's hard to say that David Montgomery is anything but a top 5 running back. Now, James Conner at 19 actually ended up being my RB1 in the Flock League, so sending up a prayer that James Conner is solid this year. I think he'll be good at the beginning of the season. Sounds like Trey Benson isn't really going to have much of a role at the beginning of the year in particular. Obviously, the issue that you're going to have is over the course of these 17 weeks, once we start getting closer to the fantasy football playoffs, we're going to assume that Trey Benson has a larger and larger share of this backfield. James Conner is also a running back that you've had to deal with injuries where he's never played a full season at the NFL level. And this is someone that was drafted in the same draft classes like Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, right? So he has been around for quite some time. So if you're looking at Conner, I think it's an okay spot if you're a 0 RB build to go ahead and draft him aggressively like I did in the Flock League, hoping that I'm going to find another running back off waivers by the time Benson maybe starts coming around. Now, Aaron Jones will be our next RB at 20. If you're looking at Aaron Jones, it's very tough putting him next to Ramondre Stevenson. They're both projected out to be in very bad offenses this season. Right now, sportsbooks are saying that the Vikings offense will be better than what you have in New England. The Ramondre Stevenson usage in the preseason wasn't the best, where it does look like Antonio Gibson is going to have a role here on third down. And if Stevenson's in an offense that's not going to be scoring too many points, and he has to compete on third down for Antonio Gibson targets, then all of a sudden he may be getting squeezed and not necessarily have a ton of opportunities in the high value areas of the football field. Now, Najee Harris will be our next back. Najee, I believe, was maybe a little higher the last time we made this rankings list because you had the Jaylen Warren injury, but it sounds like Jaylen Warren is going to be good to go week 1. So with that in mind, I think you probably have to drop Najee Harris down just a bit. I do want to remind everybody that if Warren were to go down, I think Najee Harris is a must-start player every single week. If Najee were to go down, I think Jaylen Warren is a must-start player each and every week. Jaylen Warren should be a more efficient running back than Najee Harris, but as it stands today, Najee Harris does project to see more volume. Now, DeAndre Swift will be our last running back in this tier at 23. If we are looking at DeAndre Swift, I think it's almost safe to say that he is the starting running back in Chicago. What I would maybe just want to be keeping our eyes on is what does the split look like between the 3 running backs here? If you don't have anything happening with Roschon Johnson, where Roschon Johnson's not getting on the field at all, and it's just Khalil Herbert versus DeAndre Swift, that would definitely be a very positive thing for Swift. But I'm a little bit concerned that this may be a 3-man running back by committee, but I'm also very biased because 1, hook 'em horns, and 2, at the same time, I've drafted a lot of Roschon Johnson around 18 on Underdog, so I'm praying that he does something. Now, dropping down to our next tier, Zamir White's going to be very similar to what we talked about with some of these running backs above him. The issue is he's not going to catch the ball, or at least he never caught the ball at Georgia. He's never caught the ball at the NFL level. And right now, the Raiders project out to be one of the worst offenses in the NFL. So he may very well be a starting running back at the NFL level. He could see 15 touches per game. But if you don't have the trips to the red zone, and not only do you not have the trips to the red zone, but you are not going to have a decent amount of targets in this offense, his overall ceiling may be severely capped. Now, obviously, non-PPR format, I think he would be a little more exciting, just like Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert would be very exciting in a non-PPR league. I know it's crazy that we're going to have him ranked all the way down here at 25, considering what he did last year, considering the Miami Dolphins projected out to be a top 5 offense in the NFL this season. My thing with Mostert is this going to be a running back that should not catch the ball. Not only is he not going to catch the ball, but you also have to be concerned both with Devon Achane as well as Jalen Wright. And Raheem Mostert has never been able to stay healthy outside of this past season. Now, Jaylen Warren will be our next guy at 26. Jaylen Warren, I kind of want to say that he's a better running back than Najee Harris at this point of their respective careers. But it just simply doesn't matter because what we've seen from this coaching staff is Najee will be the guy with the workload. Warren obviously is going to have a role, but at the same time, I don't necessarily think that that role will be someone you're excited to start from week to week perspective. He may instead just be in line with, say, like a premium handcuff running back that if you needed to start him, you could. Very similar to, say, David Montgomery, where with David Montgomery, he's a running back that if you were to see an injury to Jahmyr Gibbs, he looks like an elite option in fantasy. You can't start Montgomery even with the health of Jahmyr Gibbs. You're just not that excited about it. Now, Jonathan Brooks will be our next guy at 27. Brooks is extremely difficult to rank because he probably won't play the beginning of the season. So if he's not going to play the beginning of the year, we do have to keep in mind that he is almost undraftable in leagues that you don't have an IR slot. If you don't have an IR slot, you're going to have to roster him, and you're really going to be tied up where you shouldn't be able to make too many waiver wire moves at the beginning portion of this season. Then there, I'd probably recommend that you just straight up look in another direction of Jonathan Brooks because he will severely cap your ceiling overall. But instead, if you're going to be playing in a league that you can throw Jonathan Brooks in the IR after you draft him, and you get another option off of the waiver wire and essentially just have a free roster spot, I think that makes a ton of sense. Now, Zach Moss will be our next guy here at 28. With Zach Moss, I have no idea if he's any good, and I'll throw Chase Brown right next to him as well. You will see in your regular redraft league, Zach Moss go rounds ahead of Chase Brown. In underdog drafts, you will see Chase Brown go ahead of Zach Moss. I'm going to keep it very simple, and I'm going to be very honest with you. I have no idea who the guy will be between these two running backs. I personally don't think either running back here is that talented. But what we can say is the Cincinnati Bengals are a borderline top 5 offense this year in projections. Somebody's going to have to score the ball with no Joe Mixon. Moss looked great at flashes last year. Chase Brown's the young, explosive athlete. Chase Brown's had a bunch of positive press coming out of training camp and the preseason. So it is very difficult to rank both these running backs. Tony Pollard will be our next guy. Pollard looks to be the lead in the committee. I do want to stand by. I am for sure Team Pollard over Tyjae Spears this year, as we've mentioned in the past. But this coaching staff has said, oh yeah, we don't even know if we're going to have a starter. It's just going to be split between those two guys. Hot hand, whoever's performing well, they're going to be getting the ball. So Tony Pollard looks like he's going to be in a running back by committee in what projects to be potentially a bottom 5 offense in the NFL, where right now sportsbooks are saying the Titans should score the 5 fewest points in the NFL this season. So I think we have to be a little bit worrisome of that. Javonte Williams at 31. It looks like Jaleel is going to have the role on third downs. Jaleel should have a considerable amount of targets in this backfield. Now, of course, Estime, on the other hand, didn't really put himself in a position where it looks like he is going to have a role from week to week perspective outside of a Javonte Williams injury. It looks like Estime may indeed just be the clear backup to Javonte. But who knows? Maybe that could change. And maybe we are wrong here. Maybe Estime does have a role, and it is a 3-man committee in one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Yes, I know Bo Nix looked good in the preseason, but sportsbooks are projecting them to be a bottom 5 offense. And then our next guy will be Brian Robinson. With Brian Robinson, you probably need to rank him over Ekeler because Robinson is going to have the red zone role here. And obviously, we're not expecting Jaden Daniels to have a super high checkdown rate. But I will let you know, I think that people are maybe overrating Brian Robinson just a little bit and underrating Austin Ekeler a little bit. I got Austin Ekeler, I want to say 3-4 rounds after Brian Robinson in a full PPR draft in the Flock League, which I was very excited about that Ekeler price tag. I'm dropping down to our next tier. We're going to go Trey Benson at 33. What's tough about Benson is if you were to take Jonathan Brooks, you're in a situation in which you could potentially throw him on your IR and you're not having to waste a roster spot. However, specifically with Trey Benson, it looks like you're not going to be able to do so. He's not going to be startable at the beginning of the season. So he's a player that you're drafting, you're throwing on the bench just in the hopes that you have a high ceiling in the second half of the season, which I'm for sure willing to do it. This is another one of those guys that I took in the Flock League, so I'm definitely rooting for Benson. I paired James Conner at a very reasonable price tag with Trey Benson at a very reasonable price tag, just because on that 0 RB build, I really needed to guarantee that I have a viable RB. Now, our next guy we're going to look at will be Devin Singletary. I always like keeping it stupid simple here. Saquon Barkley was not able to be productive with how bad the situation was with the Giants. So if Saquon Barkley was unable to be productive, what makes us think that Devin Singletary will be? I don't know. He looks like he's going to be the 3-down back. He looks like he'll have targets out of the backfield. He'll look like, hey, he's going to have a red zone role. But this should be a very bad offense for the Giants. This team has ruined one of the best running backs in the NFL. So when we get just an average running back in here, I don't know what we can reasonably expect. Austin Ekeler will be our next guy at 35. Now, Ekeler looks like he has no juice left. The contract that he gets from Washington indicates he probably has no juice left, or at least that's what NFL teams are thinking at this point. But if you look at Ekeler from a full PPR perspective, I still think that he's going to be able to catch the ball. I still think that he's going to give you a baseline floor. And while we're expecting that Brian Robinson has the goal line role, that's not necessarily a guarantee. So if you're able to get Austin Ekeler 4 or 5 rounds after Brian Robinson, such as where I did in the Flock League, I think that makes sense. Now, going over to Tyjae Spears. Spears, like I said, I am putting Pollard over him. He is possibly the second fiddle in one of the worst offenses in the NFL this season. And while, yes, he got on the field and he actually drew targets last year, we know Derrick Henry is not a viable pass catcher where Tony Pollard potentially can be. I think that Spears will for sure be startable if you really need to throw him in your lineup. If you are really desperate, I took him in the Flock League because I was desperate for running backs. But the thing is, I don't think you're ever going to be excited to start Spears if Pollard's healthy. So he's almost like a handcuff running back that's in a bad offense. Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford will be our next guys back-to-back here. So Deonta Foreman goes down with an injury. It looks like Jerome Ford is absolutely going to crush at the beginning of the season. Looks like Nick Chubb's going to be missing the first month of the year. So if you know that your league mates are very active traders and you think that you are going to be able to wheel and deal and potentially sell Jerome Ford after week 3, if he turns out to be a low-end RB1 through the first month of the season, then honestly, maybe you push Jerome Ford higher than this just based off the early season projections. But the issue is once Nick Chubb does come back and once Nick Chubb is healthy, I just think Jerome Ford's not startable. And now Gus Edwards will be our next guy at 39. I do want to reiterate, these will be rankings for a full PPR league. I don't think that Gus Edwards is going to be a running back that catches the ball. This isn't a situation where he's gone out and he has just absolutely crushed the... We haven't seen the guy, right? We haven't seen him. Very uncertain backfield. We know he's not going to really have a receiving role here. So it's hard to just be all in on Gus Edwards. Now, Ezekiel Elliott, Rico Dowdle will be our next two players. And this is very similar to the Cincinnati Bengals situation. The Dallas Cowboys offense should be one of the better offenses in the league. If you look at Zeke and Dowdle, I don't think either running back is talented. However, given this situation, you have to give them respect in fantasy. I honestly think that I am potentially ranking them too low here. And if we wanted to move them to the tier above, we for sure could and possibly should do that. But also similar to the Cincinnati backs, if you are drafting on Underdog, Rico Dowdle is going to be more expensive. However, if you are drafting on ESPN, if you are drafting on Yahoo, then instead Ezekiel Elliott will be the guy that's more expensive. Now, dropping down to our other tier, we're going to be looking at Chuba Hubbard, Zach Charbonnet, Blake Corum. Hubbard should be startable at the beginning portion of the season, but it is a very bad offense, and that's going to be the difference between him and Jerome Ford. And then obviously, once Jonathan Brooks is back and healthy, Chuba Hubbard will no longer be startable. I think Zach Charbonnet is one of the most premium handcuff backs that you can get this year, because if you were to get an injury to Kenneth Walker, I personally would project out Charbonnet to potentially be a high-end RB2 in fantasy. If Charbonnet was actually in this year's draft class, I think I would make the argument to have Zach Charbonnet as the RB1 over Jonathan Brooks, considering the torn ACL. But as it stands right now, this coaching staff has indicated, like we said, that it does seem like Kenneth Walker is going to have the third down role. Blake Corum will be in here at 44. I don't think Blake Corum will be startable with the healthy Kyren Williams, but Kyren Williams has had a laundry list of injuries, and we have seen this Rams offense be able to put up a running back that I never thought could do it. Kyren Williams as an RB1 finished this past season. So I think that combined with the depth chart, there really is no running back 3 here. Corum has the upside if anything were to occur to Kyren Williams. Now, our last tier, this is going to be the kind of whatever guys. These will be the running backs that you can potentially look at the end of your draft. Definitely going to be churning them. Ty Chandler, Tyler Algier, Jaleel Dobbins, Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd. I will give a shout out to Sal in the Flock League though, because I thought that Tyler Algier was long gone and he got just an absurd value on Algier, which I'm very jealous for, because I want to say that if Bijan Robinson were to go down, Tyler Algier probably projects out to be a high-end RB2 in fantasy. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging out with me in this video. I really hope I was able to help you out in some way. Really hope you're able to get something from this. And of course, if you want to get into an extra fantasy football draft this year, the best place to do so is going to be on Underdog Fantasy, because there's no time commitment at all during the season. It's how I draft hundreds of teams every year. It's how I won 150,000 on Underdog 2 years ago. And if you go to the link in the description or the comment section and use code FLOCK, you are going to get my 2024 rankings, 2024 draft guide, 2024 ADP consensus cheat sheet, plus a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000, plus a Christian McCaffrey special pick'em more than less than half a total yard for week 1. It's a Flock exclusive, and Underdog's also doing a new user offer of Travis Kelce more than less than half a total yard week 1 as well that you'll get with code Flock. But I think that's all I have for you. Really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day, and really hope I get to draft with you in an Underdog stream later tonight.